Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist?
What are some of your what are your top 5 favorite WrestleMania matches?
Well, okay, I already said the triple threat with Shawn Michaels, Triple H.
Triple H with Booker T is not one of mine, by the way. I hate that match because Booker T should have won. This is somebody who that match was just the storyline was inappropriate. That was one of those cringy things from the Ruthless Aggression era, and it was only made more cringy when Triple H won. Mm-hmm. After the 30 seconds of nothing, when they're both dead on the floor, somehow Booker T doesn't kick out. That wasn't cool. They should have had Booker T get up, kick out, and beat him.
Yeah.
But for some stupid reason, they didn't do that. Even if Triple H was going to win the title the next night again and give Booker T the one-day reign, they still should have just let him win at WrestleMania, just to put that on there, so the people would always just watch that match. Because I think people would have gone back to watching it and people would have loved that match because it was a good match, but except for the stupid finish.
I think also the way they tried to play it off, it wasn't a racist thing. It was he WCW guys, not
no. You showed his mugshot in the promo. It's pretty obvious. Anyway, we'll get away from that one, but I felt the need to say that to bring that up since we were on the subject of Triple H and best matches because that's not a good one. That's a worst match for sure. I would say that might be the worst WrestleMania match, if not the Triple H Ultimate Warrior 1-2. There have been, the gimmick battle royal was not. That was not gonna be a 5-star match, but it was entertaining.
I would say Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair, Flair's retirement match. That's definitely one of my top 5.
The Shawn Michaels career trilogy. That's what I call it. I don't know what you want to call it, but that's what I call those 3 matches, is the Shawn Michaels retirement trilogy. Mm-hmm. I actually watched that recently for my birthday, all 3 of them in the same night, and God, so good. The Ric Flair match especially, that part, it makes you, that part, all 3 of those matches makes you want to cry because of how emotional they are.
Yeah. Yeah, the real raw emotion, because obviously, again, they know this is going to be Ric Flair's last match with the company before they're going into it. But the way they kind of they play it up, and Shawn Michaels is about to end the career of one of his favorite wrestlers and one of his biggest influences in the wrestling business. And it's you can see the pain on his face.
Yeah, and he hesitates, and Ric Flair gets mad at him.
Yeah.
Because he's I want you to do this. And Ric Flair doesn't want to retire, but he wants to retire at the same time, and he wants to go out the right way. And he's I want you to do this service for me.
And, the absolute, respect. Shawn pins him, kind of gives him, a hug and says something to him, and then immediately vacates the ring. So that Rick can have his moment.
Well, also, there's the moment before that, which is the best part of the match, is when Shawn Michaels doesn't want to do it, and Ric Flair he kicks him anyway. Ric Flair hits him. Shawn Michaels kicks him reflexively,
Mm-hmm.
And he, like, gets in the corner and he, like, panics and he's like, shit, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And Ric Flair gets up with the tears in his eyes and he does, like, the John Wayne, like, come on, you son of a bitch pose. And he's like, just give it to me. He's wobbling and he's like, just give it to me. Mm-hmm. And Shawn Michaels goes, I love you, I'm sorry. And he takes his head off with that kick. And then he does the pin and just leaves immediately after, like, saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's such a great match. I'm trying to think more. I liked John Cena versus Triple H. It was WrestleMania 22. I know a lot of people don't like Cena.
Is that when he wins the first time? Well, they loved him then.
Well, I even then people didn't like him because he was really being pushed as like the golden boy, and he was always being made champion. You know,
was that in
like the start of the Cena hate? I think.
Well, he was the champ. Well, was that the first time that he won the title when it was him versus Triple H, or was it a triple threat match with him, Triple H, and Shawn Michaels also?
No, he went into WrestleMania as champion. It was just him versus Triple H.
Oh, okay. So is the year prior the one when he wins? Is 21 the one when he becomes champion the first time?
20 he became United States champion.
Yeah, he beat the Big Show that year.
Yeah, so 21 is Cena versus Bradshaw, and Cena won, and that was the first. He was first WWE championship, I think.
Okay.
It might have been it was his first or his second, maybe. I don't remember.
Okay, because there's one where they basically do the Benoit match, and he even wins with the STF, which is similar to the Crippler Crossface in some ways.
Yeah.
Which was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Well, he did submit Triple H for the World Heavy. It was WWE Championship, so they could have been that, but it was only him versus Triple H.
Okay. I feel like they did a triple threat match. I feel like they had a similar triple threat match at another WrestleMania, but I could be wrong.
They possibly did, or maybe it was a different pay-per-view.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I've seen this, but you know, I could be having a Mandela effect moment.
Yeah. And then I think Taker versus Orton, where Cowboy Bob Orton came out and interfered.
Oh yeah.
That was like a brutal match, you know.
I don't remember that one, honestly.
It was bloody, like really bloody.
Yeah.
And I think there was a problem because so Undertaker didn't know that Cowboy Bob Orton was. Oh wait,
wasn't that a Hell in a Cell match?
I believe so.
Was that at the WrestleMania, or was that a different one?
Wasn't it WrestleMania?
I thought it was. I thought it wasn't WrestleMania. But I know there was one. I know he did fight Randy Orton at one pay-per-view though. I think there was a series of matches, so I don't know if that was. I don't know if that was one of the matches in that particular feud. Mm-hmm. And the Cell was the blow off, but I know what you're talking about. But go on.
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
I think it was a Hell in a Cell, though.
I can't think of any off the top of my head anymore that like really stick out to me.
Yeah, the Hell in a Cell was Armageddon.
Okay, but there was a Taker versus Randy Orton match at WrestleMania.
Yeah, WrestleMania 21. I think that was when Orton was doing the Legend Killer gimmick.
Yes, yeah. So that was a good match.
Yeah. Yeah, but I know what you're talking about. So like, tell the story for the people anyway.
Okay, so this was at Armageddon. It was a Hell in a Cell. Randy Orton and Taker, and Randy Orton had his dad, Cowboy Bob Orton, in his corner, and it was a brutal, like, you know, Hell in a Cell match. We're talking like blood gushing everywhere, and Undertaker did not know going in that Cowboy Bob Orton was hepatitis, I believe, C positive.
Yeah,
and that was a big controversy because Taker was, rolling around in the guy's blood and was rightfully pissed off when he found out. So I don't know how they smoothed that over with Taker, because I'm sure he was like ready to quit over that.
I think he was. I think he was trying to. I think he was basically trying to get Randy Orton fired after that.
Yeah.
Or there at least had been a conversation where he was like, where Taker was probably like, all right, well, somebody's getting friggin' fired for not telling me this.
Yeah.
I don't think they worked with Bob Orton after that for a long time, if they ever did again.
No, he wasn't on TV for a long time after that. I don't know if he's been back since then, but I know that was pretty much like he was like, they kind of tried to brush it off, brush it under the rug a little bit, just pretend he didn't exist.
Yeah. The poster for that pay-per-view is hilarious. It's Batista. Like, it's just Batista's, like, screaming head. Like, just with the top of his head is cut off. And he's saying, oh, and, like, in his mouth, it just has the details of the pay-per-view in it. It's like, live pay-per-view Sunday, December 18th, and it has the WWE logo in his freaking mouth. It's just so awkward. They've had so many bad pay-per-view like graphics. It's like
I thought of another match that was one of my favorites. The first Money in the Bank match.
Oh yeah, that one was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it was an interesting concept, and I liked the way they did it, and it was a really good way for heels to kind of like, I liked when heels won the Money in the Bank, and then they cashed it in at the most inopportune moment and like win. It was a good, whoever came up with the Money in the Bank.
I think that was Chris Jericho's idea, because he bragged about it in one of his books.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, he was in the first Money in the Bank match, so.
Yeah. God, yeah, that was good. I miss the Money in the Bank being just a match at WrestleMania and not its own big pay-per-view. I hate gimmick pay-per-views after, named after, like,
one match.
Yeah.
Like Hell in a Cell.
That's the worst. I really hate it because by doing that they effectively killed the match itself.
Right. Well, yeah, especially because Hell in the Cells now they don't only do at the Hell in the Cell.
Yeah, and they
don't even do one at Mania anymore.
Once in a while they would do one at Mania, but
rarely.
Yeah. But I miss when you would maybe get one Hell in a Cell match a year at random and you never knew if it was going to happen at all in that year. Yeah. So, you got super duper excited, and you were like, oh, man, I can't wait to see this Hell in a Cell match. Or, oh, man, I remember, going to a wrestling pay-per-view or going to, well, not a pay-per-view. I remember going to, a SmackDown because every once in a while they do, the Hell in a Cell cage would just be there. Or, just a cage, and you would just say, oh, man, I wonder if we get a Hell in a Cell tonight.
Yeah.
Oh, wouldn't that be cool, Because, you always had that idea of, anything can happen in the... I know it's a cliche thing. Anything can happen in the WWE. But that was the excitement of that program, because you believed anything actually could happen during that time. Where, now, again, like we said, big business, overproduced and whatever. They're naming pay-per-views after the matches, so, you're going to get it, and you're going to get it at the specific pay-per-view, so it doesn't even matter, and it doesn't make any sense for the match to even happen now with Hell in a Cell sometimes. Sometimes this is the first match in the feud, where it's the Hell in a Cell is supposed to be the end-all, be-all, blow-over match, where after this, the feud's done. There's nowhere to go from here. This is the peak. Mm-hmm. And it's if that's the first match in the feud, then, where, they can't do anything to top this now, so every match after that is going to suck.
Yeah.
The first match should almost always be just a plain match. Mm-hmm. And the Hell in a Cell, if you're going to even do it, you shouldn't do that, and, you should have, a long-term storyline before you do that. You shouldn't even think about the Cell until you're at least 6 to 8 months into the feud.
Mm-hmm.
And even that, just maybe wait like 2 years. I remember every once in a while, I remember there were like some stretches where it'd be 2 years before you'd see a Hell in a Cell match.
Yeah, and I always like that.
And now they do them all the time. Well, now they do them once a year. They do it once a year. You know, like at the pay-per-view called Hell in a Cell, it doesn't even always make sense to do it. And they paint the cage red. Sometimes they have like, you know, sometimes they have the red lights or whatever, and you can barely see anything. And then they have to have one for every brand. And now they have one for the women's division too. And like, so now you have 3 Hell in a Cell matches in the same night, and it's just friggin' exhausting. And it doesn't even look like a threatening cage anymore. It looks like a toy. So, like, I don't.
Hell in a Cell, I thought, always lent itself to like bigger guys and scary guys.
Yeah.
Like, and they've kind of turned it into like, oh well, anybody does Hell in a Cell matches now. It's like, no, the whole.
Well, it doesn't even matter. Sorry, go.
It's supposed to be like a, almost like a David and Goliath kind of thing, where like you're putting, a smaller guy in a giant cage with like a giant towering like person that's just gonna like destroy them, and like that's the like excitement is like, ooh, is he gonna survive the Hell in the Cell? Or like you have 2 big guys going at it on top of the cage, like like Foley and Undertaker throws them off, like. That's what Hell in the Cell should be, like this crazy spectacle, because it should. That's what it should be. It's a crazy spectacle. It's like a giant cage.
Yeah. And now, it's not even just anybody does it. It's just, it doesn't, like, I don't care who's in the Hell in a Cell, but it needs to make sense.
Yeah.
Like, if they just started fighting last week and they're gonna have a Hell in a Cell in 2 weeks because that's when the pay-per-view is, then, like, how much can they possibly hate each other in that amount of time? Like, what can they do besides going to the other person's house and, like, beating the tar out of their family?
Yeah.
Like, can you make somebody dislike you within a 2-week span?
Right.
So it just doesn't make it doesn't make any sense unless you're willing to do that. But then we'd have to do this every year, and then even that would get played out. So then it would just be like, well, now you have to start murdering the person's family. And it's wrestling, so, they'll be back in a week. Like,
yeah. Well, it's like soap opera.
It's just a big soap opera action movie that never ends. That's why it's the Monopera. But the same goes for the Money in the Bank match. I don't like the Money in the Bank pay-per-view idea because... Like, I want it, like, even though, I knew it was only going to happen at WrestleMania, it should only happen at WrestleMania then.
Absolutely.
If it's only going to happen at one point during the year, then make it happen at WrestleMania. Don't give it its own pay-per-view. Yes.
Yeah, that's what kind of pissed me off about it, too, is that they started doing that. And it's really, it kind of, like, lends itself to how, like, uncreative WWE's gotten when they just keep making new pay-per-views based on matches. It's like they don't even come up with a clever name. It's just the Money in the Bank pay-per-view.
Yeah. Well, even the matches. Well, even the matches aren't even that good anymore. No. How could you not make a Hell in a Cell match good? Like, not good. Well, I mean, there have been some exceptions even before, like, modern times. Like, the Undertaker Big Boss Man Hell in a Cell match was just not a good match.
Yeah.
But that was at a WrestleMania, just not a good match. I don't know if it was anybody's particular. I just don't think that match. I don't think that match worked for those 2 people to be in that spot. And also, that feud didn't make any sense as to why they needed to be in a Hell in a Cell. And anyway, where the hell was I? Shoot, I lost my train of thought. Help me.
Bad, like...
Oh, yes, how it got bad now. So, like, even the wrestlers or the agents producing them are out of ideas, too. Like, where they're just doing highlights of the Hell in a Cell from 20 years ago. We probably mentioned this somewhere else on the podcast too, and I'm probably saying the same thing verbatim. But like, there was a Seth Rollins Dean Ambrose Hell in a Cell match like a few years ago, and I thought it was going to be really great, and then the whole match they were just recreating other spots from the first two Hell in a Cell matches.
Yeah.
And I was so disappointed because I was like even to the part where like the supernatural interference of Kane was like suddenly becoming Bray Wyatt.
Yeah.
And I was like, or like they went on top, they started on top of the cell. Dean Ambrose got thrown through a table. And even the commentary, like as overproduced and garbage as that is, was even worse because then you had Michael Cole over the air going, oh, and there goes Dean Ambrose careening off the steel cage, off the Hell in a Cell cage through the announce table, just like Mick Foley did in 1998. As part of the Attitude Era. Yeah, I was like, why is there a callback in this match? Why can't they just have their own friggin' match?
Yeah.
Like now, all I'm being reminded of is the better matches.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think the problem is
it makes me want to turn off the TV and watch the old match.
I think a lot of it is that WWE is trying to like make as many pay-per-views as possible because obviously they want people to buy pay-per-views, and so they come up with like, you know, a stupid like gimmick idea for a pay-per-view and put it into action, and then like it ends up being really lame and stupid because it's just like, you know, they didn't put any thought into it. It's clearly just a cash grab. Perfect example is Extreme Rules. The one that we went to was at 2016, right? I think it was. And
yeah,
you know,
something like that. 16 or 17.
I think it was 16. They played up the Dean Ambrose Jericho feud and like, oh, it's going to be the Asylum match and like there's going to be all these weapons. It's like they're trying to play it up because it's like, oh, it's Extreme Rules and this.
Yeah, so it has to be extra violent for no reason. And
it was the most boring match of the night. The best match of that night was the Fatal 4-Way that was just a regular match. It was just a regular Fatal 4-Way. You know, that was the best match because it was the best wrestling, you know. The Jericho Ambrose match was so slow and took so long. There was only one good spot, and that was when they brought the tax out, you know.
Yeah.
And it was
and people were popping for that. Not even like some people were like half the people that were popping were like popping because they knew the match was close to the end.
Right.
Because they were like, thank God, here's the big spot, now it's over.
Yeah. And people, like, that was, like, the most silent match by far, and that was the match that they played the whole friggin' pay-per-view on, was, like, this big Extreme Rules match, and it was, like the crowd, you could hear a pin drop in the arena.
You heard several pins drop. And then they threw somebody on top of them.
Yeah. So I think the problem is that, you know, again, it's a cash grab. WWE just comes up, they just want to make as many pay-per-views as possible, so they come up with a stupid idea for a pay-per-view, base it off of, like, one match type, and then just, like, slap a bunch of other matches on around it because they have to fill in a whole 2 hours, or 3 hours in some cases, and then, like, so it like, devalues everything. It devalues the match that they're basing it off of, like you said, the Hell in a Cell. It devalues the whole concept of having a pay-per-view because now you have like friggin' 18 pay-per-views a year, you know? And
I think there was one year where they did do 18 pay-per-views.
Yes, there was one. There was at least two, like one pay-per-view a month, and there was some months that had two.
Yeah.
So,
God, that was a chore.
Yeah. It's like one of those things.
And that was not including the NXT pay-per-views or the NXT takeovers.
Exactly. That's one of those times where it's like, I'm just going to pay for a year of the network just so I can watch the pay-per-views without buying every single one, basically. You know, like...
Well, I think that was when, like, they were really pushing the network, was like, because they just added so many more, like, pay-per-view related events, and it was just... Yeah. It's just too much.
Well, and I don't even think you had all the pay-per-views because through the network, because, like, they had some deal with, like, the pay-per-view people that were like, you can't just show every pay-per-view on the network because it's not fair to us. So they showed the big ones, like the ones that mattered. WrestleMania, a Royal Rumble, that kind of thing.
Well, I think they slowly started doing that, and then now there still are people who buy pay-per-view because they just live in very remote areas where the internet is not that great.
Yeah.
And pay-per-view still does great money. Just ask Dana White.
Mm-hmm.
But the network itself, it's cool to have all of this stuff, and we won't get into the historical stuff. The cockmasters at Peacock have banned other things since we've had that conversation.
Yes.
Which this may be a little bit more egregious because one, yes, it was stupid because they did the blackface thing again, and they shouldn't do this at all in any form of entertainment at all. Mm-hmm. But the problem was it was during a good feud and it was a good match, so now there's a whole scene missing.
Yeah.
And now if you're watching if you decide I'm going to watch everything from 1998, now it doesn't make any sense to you, and it's wait, you can't watch a movie. You can't if you watch a movie and there's a controversial part, but it's an integral part of the movie, and it says scene missing, or just any part. If you're just watching any movie and it suddenly says scene missing for about 5 minutes, then you're like, well, what the hell happened? Now you can't finish the rest of the movie. So that's all I got to say about that.
Okay, Forrest Gump.
I don't want to get more on the tangent anymore because we've already gone off of the tangent of WrestleMania in itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of my favorite matches. I mean, of course, there's the Undertaker streak. There is there's Undertaker and Kane. The first time is one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. Actually, even without the Pete Rose thing in the beginning, I'll never understand why they did the Pete Rose thing. Kane's big feud with Pete Rose, where Pete Rose just basically showed up and got his ass kicked 4 years in a row. But okay, he just had this big feud with Kane. Kane tombstones Pete Rose every time. I guess he needed that to go back to the casino. I have no idea why or how that ever happened, but it did. But yeah, that feud I love to death. And that match, the build was just this amazing movie, like you said, of these two titans. Two big guys. There's the Undertaker, and then holy shit, there's his brother. The Undertaker has supernatural powers. Oh man, Kane has supernatural powers too.
Yeah.
And Kane's bigger, so this is terrifying. So and he's the only one who can even stand up to the Undertaker and actually give him a true run for his money. You might be able to beat the Undertaker, but Kane can actually put him down.
Yeah. And
it's just this whole suspense of who's gonna win, and the Undertaker's whole building up. I don't want to fight my brother. I can't fight my brother, and Kane's I'm a burn victim, and this is all your fault because you lit the fire that created me. So, and I looked up to you, and now I'm back and now I've realized you're no good. So I'm gonna take it. So I'm gonna take it out. And Kane is a sympathetic character, and you can get behind as to why he's so twisted, from his perspective, in his mind and in a lot of the story, he did nothing wrong. He's just a victim of the situation. And the Undertaker is also he's partially, he's still very remorseful, but he also, he doesn't want to fight his brother. He's just remorseful and he feels terrible. Yeah. But Kane's also Kane's also right because the Undertaker didn't talk about him. So he's where were you all these years? I needed you. Where were you? So you can understand the Undertaker made his mistakes too, and he kind of doesn't want to face him.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to face his mistakes, so they're both flawed characters in their own right. And the whole they're being brought to get, and what's bringing them together is Paul Bearer, who is not only the Undertaker's former manager, but he's also this part I think it gets a little ridiculous, but he's also the illegitimate father of Kane.
Yes.
So that part I think is a little too goofy, but everything else up to that point is just amazing. And the match itself is just this total back and forth, and Kane kicks out of the Undertaker's tombstone, and this was the first time anybody did that. And then Kane gives The Undertaker his own tombstone, and then they go back and forth, and The Undertaker, he has to do 2 regular tombstones, and the third one is on and then I think, yeah, he gives him 3 tombstones, and he beats Kane, and he doesn't even have a second to like celebrate, and Kane sits up like Michael Myers, and Kane gets it, and Paul Bearer throws a chair in the ring, and Kane tombstones The Undertaker on the chair. So it's like, oh my god, he beat him, but this is far from over, and it's just, and it's like a good 30-minute match. 45 if you include the 45 if you include the entrances and the build promo, and that's one of my favorites. Stone Cold versus Bret Hart. I hadn't seen that up until a year ago. Like, for whatever reason, that match always escaped me, and I finally sat down and I said, you know what? This was at the start of the pandemic, so it was on my birthday. So I was like, we're like totally quarantined, like the rest of the world. If you don't mind, my lady, like I was talking to my girlfriend, I was like, if you don't mind, my lady, I would like to watch a bunch of wrestling matches after breakfast. And she was like, well, it's your birthday, and the world has nothing better to do, so I guess so. She fell asleep anyway, but so she was like, I don't care, I got a nap in. But that match is amazing, and that match really made Stone Cold. They did the double turn, which even now, that's like one of the few things that's still sacred in wrestling, is the double turn. Because nobody sees that coming, and it almost never happens. It happens maybe once every like 5-ish years, 5 to 6 years, maybe even more, you'll see a double turn, but usually never happens. And Stone Cold is just freaking bleeding like a stuck pig. I love those calls that JR has, but like, still, but I mean, he didn't call that match, I don't think.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think. I think he became a color commentator later that year after Vince went off the air.
Vince was on. Oh no, Jim Ross was a commentator at that WrestleMania, but Vince may have been calling that match.
Vince may have been calling that as well. I don't know. I think it was Vince and King at that point was the announcer team.
According to the Wikipedia article,
maybe Jim Ross was
Jim Ross was there. Maybe he was doing interviews.
Yeah, I think that's what he had been doing at first. As far as his on-air stuff goes, and I think they brought him in to do commentary.
Yeah,
like more when Vince McMahon wanted to, like when the secret was out that he was the owner the whole time, and he was being Mr. McMahon. And like, because he couldn't be the announcer anymore, he had to be an on-air personality. So I think that's when they made the big switch. And but God, Stone Cold, he bleeds and he bleeds and he bleeds, and you have that iconic shot. And this is why blood is so important in pro wrestling.
Yeah,
because like, you don't need to do it frequently and you don't need to do it often, but the few times that you do it, it will matter. You have to make it matter, and it has to, and it will make it can make a bad match a really good match. Like, it can turn a bad match into a good match, and it can turn a good match into a great match.
Yeah.
And that's something that happened here. This was already a very good match. This pushed it over the edge to being a spectacular match. And you have that iconic shot where Stone Cold passes out. And it was an I Quit submission match, which is a weird stipulation because Stone Cold doesn't have any submission holds. He never did. He had the $1 Million Dream, but like, that wasn't really his move. Like, that's just what they gave him because they didn't really know what to do with him, and he was the ringmaster and whatever. And then he eventually broke out into his own, which that's another thing that doesn't really happen too much because of the overproduction and the scripted promos and all that nonsense. And he ends up passing out from the pain, and there's the shot where he's bleeding everywhere, and the blood goes into the mouth and over the tooth, and he's screaming, and he just passes out. And in his eyes, in everybody's eyes watching, this man just became a friggin' treasure because he was so damn tough that he wasn't gonna let the other guy win. He was just gonna, like, if he was gonna let the other guy win, he wasn't gonna give him the satisfaction of watching him submit. He was just gonna pass out, and that's it. Like, he'd rather go unconscious. Like, he just basically had that look like, I'd rather die than lose to you.
Yeah.
And it was like, it just, that's a spectacular one. Any Stone Cold versus The Rock match is just amazing.
Iconic.
There was nothing, yes, iconic is truly the word. I mean, there's nothing better than that. But I rewatched this the other day, too. I mean, there's also the career versus streak matches. Those are unbelievable. And even even to finish that thought where you were going earlier is, the build of those two matches were great, and they stemmed from the Ric Flair match. And it was just incredible. And you had, for the first one was just, Mr. WrestleMania versus the Undertaker. Versus the streak, and it was like, okay, this is really cool. This is really great. This is gonna go. And the first match was a classic, and the second one was better because they polished everything. Like the second match was much cleaner, and the first match, there are some scary spots. Like, there's some things where Shawn Michaels doesn't where he misses the moonsault, or he's a little too far or whatever. And he catches himself on the table, and the table doesn't quite break the way that it should. But there's also that really scary thing where the Undertaker dives off the top rope. He does that, like, cat dive where he goes over the rope, and he gets caught on the top ropes just slightly, like his toe gets caught up, and he goes straight down, and Shawn Michaels, like, throws the cameraman in his face so that he can break the fall, because if he didn't do that, like, the Undertaker, like, scorpions almost, and he hits his head right on the concrete, and he probably, like, jammed up his neck really bad there.
Yeah.
But if that cameraman didn't get shoved in his face and, like, try to, like, stop it a little bit or cushion it in some way, he might have died, like, right there.
Yeah.
So there were a few scary spots in the first one. And the second one, it's just Shawn Michaels wants to have the Ric Flair treatment and retire too. And he wants to fight the Undertaker, and he wants to beat him. He's like, I got sloppy last time, I got overconfident. I want to beat you. Like this, I know I can beat you. And the Undertaker's like, no, we already had a match. I beat you. Stop crying. Like, we're done. And Shawn Michaels is like, no. So he costs the Undertaker the championship belt at Elimination Chamber. And I think that Elimination Chamber match, I don't know if it's that one, but there's one Elimination Chamber where the Undertaker, his pyro goes, like, the pyro guy messes up, or there's something wrong with the pyro in his entrance, and it, like, burns he gets, like, second and third degree burns on his chest. Like, his whole front gets lit up like a Christmas tree, and he has to do the whole match. He has to go out and do the match now, and he's like, whole body is on fire, basically. So he, like, so like, the camera wouldn't cut away to him when he's in the Elimination Chamber cage, like when he's in the little cell. He's, like, dousing himself with water the whole time. Yeah.
Well, it's like, I think it was a WrestleMania that Triple H got, like, secondary burns from it wasn't pyro, though. It was the fog machine or whatever sprayed, like, not, like, I guess, like, dry ice on his stomach, and he ended up getting, like, secondary burns from that, and had to wrestle the whole match with, like, secondary burns.
That sucks.
Yeah.
But the things we do, we do to entertain people, and then once it's easier to do the match because But like the thing is, once that adrenaline wears off and you're in the back, you are in pain.
Yes. Yeah.
But anyway, so Shawn Michaels super kicks the Undertaker and screws him out of his championship belt, and now he's really pissed. So he's like, I'm not gonna do it. And he's like, all right, well, he's like, I've cost you the belt. He's like, he's like, fine, if you don't do this, then how about I make it even more interesting? What else can I do to get you to fight me? How about I put my career on the line if you're so confident that you beat me once and you can't, like, it doesn't matter. If it really doesn't matter, then I'll put my career on the line and you can retire me. How about that? And he's like, okay, fine. He does it. And then you have that, he hesitates too. They have that whole classic match, and then the Undertaker hesitates at the end too. He's got him beat. And he doesn't want to do it. And then Shawn Michaels is like, you son of a bitch, you better do it. And he slaps him and he picks him up and he tombstones him and he does the big spike one too. And that's the end of the show. And then he leaves it for Shawn Michaels too.
Yeah.
And that would have been great if Saudi Arabia didn't happen and then all the money ruined everything.
Yeah.
Shawn Michaels came out of retirement for the worst match, and we'll just pretend that it didn't happen. I've never watched it. I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm.
And Shawn Michaels has now even said if he knew, after watching The Undertaker's documentary, if he knew that The Undertaker wanted to do this to try to, have his last match to go out on that was good, he would have never done it. But whatever. It happened. What else do we have here? Oh, yes. And I don't know. But I was watching this the other night. You also have Savage versus Steamboat, which is a classic in itself. Mm-hmm. Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan versus Macho Man was great. When the Mega Powers collide, I loved that.
Yeah. I mean, Andre the Giant versus Hogan is probably the definitive WrestleMania match.
Yeah.
What was it, WrestleMania 3, when he picked up Andre the Giant and nobody had done anything close to that before.
No.
And Hogan, that was when Hogan was on top of the world. He was the number one wrestler. Every kid was a Hulkamaniac. Mm-hmm. And they saw him, do this ridiculous feat of strength, picking up Andre the Giant, who was 500-600 pounds, and body slamming him.
God. I mean, you can't talk about WrestleMania without talking about Andre the Giant. Or Hulk Hogan, and they were just so freaking pivotal. To the business.
And Macho Man,
Yeah, and Macho Man too. He was a treasure too. I honestly really liked when it was him versus Hulk Hogan, and he went bad, and he was the Macho King, and he had Sherry Martel, and then at the end, Hulk Hogan beats him, but then you have that moment with Macho Man and Elizabeth, and it's like, oh, will they or won't they? Are they going to get back together now that has he seen the error of his ways? And they do, and their embrace is better than the match itself in some ways, where it's that's the payoff that everybody wanted. Yes, they wanted the match to happen, and yes, they wanted the two to fight, and yes, they put on a classic, but they really wanted to see if things were going to be okay with him and Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. And that was really cool too. But there's also WrestleMania 10, where it's Bret Hart versus Owen Hart. Mm-hmm. The whole Yokozuna match was what it was. It was as good as it could have been when Bret wins the belt, and I thought that was also really cool. But WrestleMania 10, it has Bret. The opening match is Bret versus Owen, and I wish that there were more Bret versus Owen matches to watch. I could never get tired of that. They had an absolute chess match, and oh god, it was just so damn good.
Yeah.
I wish Owen Hart were still with us today.
Yeah.
And I wish that Bret Hart had never gotten sent into early retirement from the concussion. Yeah. Who knows what other matches he would have had later on in his career. But, it is what it is. We also have the ladder match, the first WrestleMania ladder match. like Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon, which
great match.
awesome
Great
and a
match.
classic. Bret Hart in the book claims that Shawn Michaels stole the idea from him because him and Shawn Michaels were supposed to do the ladder match, and then Shawn pitched it to Vince later on, and then Vince said okay, possible, don't know. I mean, Bret in the book, well, Bret accuses a lot of people of stealing ideas from him and whatever. So it's a wrestling book. I have to take it with a grain of salt. He takes himself very, very, very seriously, almost too seriously, I would say, in the book.
Yeah.
Where everything he does is justified and noble, and he's never wrong and all this stuff. His book is very bitter.
And we discussed it previously on a different episode. We discussed Bret Hart's, kind of his thoughts.
Right.
And,
that's why I'm trying to shorten it up so that I don't get on a tangent.
And it's it's stupid because now Shawn and Bret are pretty much over it. They're on fairly good terms now. They've had interviews, the two of them together.
Yeah.
I think Bret now blames Vince more for that whole situation.
I think he does.
Shawn. So whatever. It's we talked about this before. Bret, he has a reason to be bitter, but at the same time, he kind of let that bitterness rule his life. He could have, a lot of people, they always say the best revenge is to live well, and instead he just dwelled on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So as I was getting to, I was watching this the other night. I had a bad week or a bad day really, and I was just not in the best mood, and I was not the nicest guy to be around. I was kind of a jerk, and I felt really bad about it. And my girlfriend, as sweet as she could be, and as wonderful as she is, she goes, "Listen, I'm sorry you had a bad day. Why don't you take a bath, listen to some music, have a drink? I'm going to bed, and you should watch a wrestling match tonight. Before you go to bed, you should watch a wrestling match." And I said, "Okay, thank you for understanding. I love you. I'm sorry." And then I super kicked her. No. No, I could never do that. Honestly, she's pretty smart. She'd probably duck and super kick me. No, so I was watching this the other night, and this match always gives me goosebumps. I don't know. I think it might be my favorite WrestleMania match. It's The Rock versus Hulk Hogan.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that was a long time coming. Pretty much.
It's amazing that it happened.
The top of each of their respective generations. It's lucky that it happened because Hogan was older obviously at that point. He could have easily had an injury that ended his career before that. So it's lucky that it happened. And it's also surprising that they each of them were able to put their egos to the side and kind of put on a good match because both of them were probably well, no, I want to win.
I think The Rock was a little. I think The Rock was just kind of more open to whatever. I think having grown up in the business and understanding how Hulk Hogan was, he was probably all right. His original thought was probably all right, he's probably gonna have Hulk Hogan win. I don't care, whatever. It's an honor to share the ring with him because The Rock is a gracious guy. And
yeah, but at that time, The Rock was kind of.
But The Rock was at his. But The Rock was at his peak. Oh, I'm sure he had an ego. Are you kidding me? He was at the guy was at the top of his game. Why wouldn't you? And,
I mean, because you look at that match between Shawn Michaels and Hogan, and Hogan refused to do the job to Shawn Michaels. So
they were also supposed. Well, they were also supposed to have a trilogy.
Yeah.
They were supposed to have a trilogy, and Hogan was supposed to, and I think Michaels was supposed to win the trilogy. Hogan was supposed to win the first one, and then Michaels was supposed to win the next two. And Hogan, he didn't want to lose lose the feud. He wanted to have the W over Shawn Michaels. So he made up a bunch of crap. He was like, "Oh, my back's hurting. Oh, I don't know. I don't think I can do this. Oh, I don't know. I might have to get surgery. I've got to check on this. I got to get it checked out. I don't think I can do the other 2 matches. I'm sorry, man. Thanks." And Shawn Michaels was like, "Oh, I see how it is." So he completely sabotaged him in one of the worst selling in the world, just to make Hogan look bad. Oh, it's one of the
most hilarious wrestling matches ever.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you say, this is the equivalent of somebody somebody rebelling when their parents tell them that they can't have the cookies.
Pretty much.
This is essentially the kid going to the store and buying all of the cookies and then eating them in front of their parents while throwing dinner out the window. But Hogan and the Rock, this was not that. Instead, it's the interesting thing is that Hogan is the heel the entire time, and I was explaining this to my girlfriend, and I was like, the build of this match, you would not know who the bad. You would not know. You wouldn't think that Hogan was the bad guy in this one. And she was like, "Well, what do you mean?" I was like, "Okay." Hogan and his faction, the NWO, invaded WWE. Vince McMahon sent them in to kill his creation, which he may be doing right now in the real world in real time. And they beat the tar out of all of the top good guys for weeks. And a couple of weeks before this, possibly even the week before this, Hulk Hogan beat The Rock so bad that he had to go in an ambulance, and then Hogan took a Mack truck and he rammed it into the ambulance. Now, The Rock did not die of his injuries or go to the hospital and stay there for at least a week. Instead, The Rock was back the next night to have this and he was somehow able to put on this clinic. And she was like, "Okay, she's like, I understand not to question you, but this is really something to question logically." And I was like, "Don't do it, you'll hurt yourself." Yeah. Don't ever try to question the logic of wrestling. You will hurt yourself.
Well, you have to see wrestlers as superheroes, because that's essentially what they are.
Yeah, essentially. And just this whole match is just incredible, and they barely did anything. That's what it took away from me. I was like, this is so great, and the whole time they're just milking the crowd and they're reading the crowd. So and they switched because they caught the energy, and right before it, while everything in the audience is palpitating and it's building, and you can hear the crowd's excitement, they do nothing. For the first 2 minutes of the match, they just stare each other down, and they don't even touch. And the minute that they lock up, they just do the standard test of strength, collar and elbow tie up, and everyone is out of their chairs, screaming. And then the Rock starts working as a heel, and they totally switch. They didn't do a double turn, but the fans turned Hogan babyface that night, and they turned The Rock heel just for the match. They were like, we love The Rock, but we can't cheer him. It's Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
They were like, we could cheer The Rock if he's fighting anyone else, but we can't cheer him against Hulk Hogan. This could be Hulk Hogan's last match, and I think that's what they were viewing it as, is this is potentially his last match.
Yeah.
And they barely did anything. They barely did anything super physical at that, during the match at all. Mm-hmm. And I think that's... And you don't have... Well, no, it wasn't even that it had to be that. It was I look at that and I say, this is all you have to do. You don't have to... This is what wrestling could be. You don't have to do You don't have to do all of your moves to the other guy. You don't have to do each other's finishes 30 different times and kick out of them 29 of them. You don't have to you don't have to throw in all the weapons. You don't have to do all the run-ins. You don't have to do all these super physical moves and 300 backflips and a freaking double elbow credenza or whatever it is. You don't have to do arm bars 36 times. You don't have to do like a 305 mile an hour stunt show, car accident in order to get the audience pumped up. If you can keep it as simple as you can, do it. Just build. All it is just building and reading the crowd. Yeah, and that's all that they did.
That's what I mean by if they did it as this crazy spot fest and weapons and all this, it would not have been that good of a match.
No, we wouldn't be talking about it in this light. We would be saying, man, I wish they did something else. But they did. That match was as perfect as a match can possibly be. Mm-hmm. I think that might be... That's probably why this is my favorite WrestleMania match. And it's definitely one of my favorite matches of all time. Mm-hmm. And it's also the story that they told was just the young lion versus the old lion, and it was is he gonna take over the pride?
Yeah.
Is he gonna or is the old one gonna have one last fight in him, and is he gonna be able to subdue the young lion? We don't know. And it was just one of those. There was magic that they caught in that moment that they will never replicate, and I'm glad that it's immortalized on home video for everybody.
Yeah.
Or digital media device land for everyone. Unless the Cockmasters find something wrong with it and shut it down.
Well, I was going to say the Cockmasters are going to take it out because Hogan is, come out as has said racist things in the past. So now the Cockmasters can't have that on their network.
Oh, so God, no.
Hogan's deleted.
Oh, here we go. But then that would
blur out. They'll just blur out Hogan. It'll be The Rock versus a giant blur.
Oh my God. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody just did that as a parody and they uploaded it just as like The Rock versus Hogan Peacock edition.
Yeah. It was was it WWE 2K15 or 16 where it had the classic feuds thing where you could go back and so they had the Shawn Michaels versus Triple H rivalry from the Attitude Era up to the Ruthless Aggression Era, and it's they just happened to skip over WrestleMania 20. It's so there was all these matches that Shawn Michaels and Triple H had, this huge rivalry, and in 2004 they kind of just they weren't there, and then they went back to it after that. It's
you can't do that. You can't have again scene missing. You can't do that.
Exactly.
How great would it have been if they just put that in the game? If it just said WrestleMania 21 and then there was just a thing that said scene missing.
Yeah. Or it's they just replace Benoit with it's
vacant vacant.
Or it's a generic looking wrestler that says the Crippler or something like that.
No,
remember the Crippler?
No, vacant. It's Vacant's time to shine.
Vacant.
Yeah, great match with Vacant. Yeah, Vacant put on a clinic. I mean, there's not really enough respect for Vacant. No, I don't think anyone's... Vacant's held every single title.
Yeah.
In every single promotion. No one is as... There's no superstar as decorated as Vacant.
In the history of professional wrestling.
Yes. And Vacant is the oldest living wrestler.
Yeah. He wrestled in every era of wrestling.
Yes. Vacant is... WrestleMania may be the showcase of the Immortals, but Vacant is the Immortals. So WrestleMania is a showcase of Vacant by that logic.
Yeah.
So so WrestleMania, it's a show about vacancies. And who will fill them for the end of time? Also, The Rock versus Hulk Hogan is good. But yeah, that match is like everything is perfect about that match. Mm-hmm. Even like well, maybe not everything. The run-in with the NWO was like, but the two of them work together to beat them, and that officially turns Hogan babyface. Mm-hmm. So while maybe that part they didn't quite need, it works with it.
Well, I think Hogan kind of needed it to kind of go back into his old persona of Hulk Hogan with the yellow and the red.
Yeah.
The classic Hogan persona. He kind of needed to like break away from the NWO, and so he could drop the Hollywood thing and go back to his classic.
Well, also, I don't know if Vince really had long-term plans with that, and like Kevin Nash was injured anyway. Mm-hmm. Like the NWO in itself just kind of imploded because Scott Hall like relapsed and like and like started drinking again, and he was like fired shortly after, and then Kevin Nash he tore his quad like walking across the ring because he just stepped wrong.
Like Vince McMahon.
Yeah.
Both quads just getting into the ring.
God. Yeah. I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
It happens when you're like putting that much stress on your body and you're like working out and, doing steroids back in the day. Maybe he wasn't doing steroids anymore at that time, but like, he was in his late 30s, early 40s. He may have done steroids at one point in his time, possibly into that quad. So, maybe he worked it out a little too hard that day, or maybe he tore. Maybe the tears had started from the workout, and
I would imagine it would have had to have started, and then he just kind of stepped wrong, and that stepping wrong just kind of like exasperated it and made it like tear off completely.
Yeah. I mean, I would say if you're gonna work out and you're a pro wrestler, you like on the days where where it's like a taping day or if it's show day, I would imagine you do the light workout on that day.
Yeah.
Where like you're not really going hard, you're just doing a maintenance check that day, essentially. And then like the following day when you're like, or like the following, several days when you're not on TV, that's when you put in the big work. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, or maybe he was trying to do a catch-up day. I don't know. There's a number of things that it could have been.
Yeah.
Or it just could have been his age. I don't know.
It could have been the injury that was developing over time, and then it just happened to, like, that was, like, the final straw, just the stepping weird. I mean, like, how many times does, you're walking down the street and you step weird and you roll your ankle, or you friggin', like, all of a sudden get a cramp that, like, I was, like... the other night, I was stepping into the shower and my back just spasmed all of a sudden because of the way I stepped. I stepped weird. And it took like 10 minutes for the spasming to stop.
Yeah.
So it's you never know. You just step weird and stretch something wrong, and that's it.
George Soros used to base his investment decisions on his back spasms sometimes.
Are you serious?
I'm deadly serious. I think it's in the book More Money Than God, which is about hedge funds, and it's like the history of hedge funds basically. Yeah. And like I've also read this in an interview too, but like his son, I forgot what his son's name is, George Soros, but his other son that also has like he has his own hedge fund. He somebody asked him like what the secret to his dad, like what his dad's like. What his dad's success was to investing, or like what he would like base his investment decisions on. He's like, honestly, I have no idea. But if my dad made a decision, it usually was a result of his back spasms.
Wow, that's.
I don't know. He must have been He must be very superstitious.
Yeah.
Or like it could be one of those things where like, if somebody, how when like somebody has like surgery, how like. And how like certain surgeries, they can tell if the weather's gonna what the weather's gonna be, like, because like they get this like they either get like a chill or they get like a sensation that in the part of their body that had this surgery, where like it only does that just before it like rains or whatever, like let's just say. And then like I guess it's one of those things where like if he had a back spasm, like something, like he just decided to like get rid of something, or like he decided to buy something, whether or not he had, I don't know. But his major things apparently happen as a result of back spasms. I don't know. But I mean, it could have been a number of reasons how and why he, why Kevin Nash had like wrecked his quad. But I mean, we do not know. Also, like the year before that, like was when Vince bought WCW, and like they chose not to just go work for WWE right away.
Yeah.
Because like they had the guaranteed contract, so they sat at home for a year and they collected like $500K or whatever it was. Like they collected stupid money just to sit home, and which ruined the Invasion storyline. But that's another topic for another day. And it could have been just rust. He could have just been rusty, and like his body going from not wrestling for a year to suddenly wrestling again. That's like a huge change for your conditioning, and his body may not have been able to handle like that, like the work at so fat, like so early on. So I don't know, but again, The Rock Hogan, perfect match, as simple as it could be. Gave everybody what they wanted. The Rock also, like, he celebrates a little bit because Hogan gives it to him, but then he's like, no, this is your time, man. Like, go pose. The people came here. They want to see you pose. They want to see you do the big thing. They want to see you celebrate. And Hogan's also, like, they're going back and forth where Hogan's like, yeah, but you won. Don't worry about it. I'm old. They don't want to. He's like, oh, come on, just do it. Everybody wants to see this. Just do it. And, like, he poses, and it's a big thing, and it's great. But it's just so cool. Like that match, there's nothing else that I can say about it. It's so cool, and I'm glad that it happened. But to go back to what you said before of how like The Rock, how like Hogan still could have been classic Hogan at that point, and he could have been politicking and doing all this stuff. That's why Stone Cold didn't want to do the match, because it was originally pitched as Stone Cold versus Hulk Hogan. And Austin didn't want to do it because he didn't feel comfortable with the finish, because he didn't know what Hogan was going to do. So he had decided, he kind of just decided, no, there was like some kind of bad juju about this mentally, so I don't want to do the match.
Yeah.
So they gave it to The Rock. Or maybe he even like suggested just give it to just if anyone's going to do the match that's not me, then give it to The Rock. It's either going to be me or Rocky. Give it to Rock. And then Stone Cold went to have a match with Scott Hall that Stone Cold hated because I think Scott Hall was drunk during the match.
Yeah.
And it was what it was, a 10-minute match. Boom, boom, stunner, done, nothing impactful. And then then The Rock and Hogan go on to put on the perfect match. I mean, Stone Cold has said now, hindsight being 2020, the payday would have been great. I should have done it for the money, but I'm glad that. But then we wouldn't have gotten that match, and that match was better than anything I probably could have done. And who could forget the TLC matches too? And like any ladder match at WrestleMania was a classic, and the TLC, even that has its own pay-per-view now.
Which
but that tag rivalry between the Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudleys, there's nothing bad that you could say about that feud.
That's definitely one of my favorites too.
Yeah, TLC 1 or TLC 2. Well, the first one is a regular ladder match, and then TLC...
Yeah, the TLC match.
Yeah, because I think the first TLC was at SummerSlam, and then TLC 2 was the one at WrestleMania. Yeah, those matches are ridiculous too. And
Yeah.
There's a JR story where, like, I mean, this happened a lot of times where, like, if a guy felt that they weren't getting paid enough for what they did, JR would basically just ask, how many zeros do I have to add to the check to make it go away? And this was one of those situations because, like, I think it was after TLC 2. Like, they got their check and Bubba got, and, like, you know, all of them, they were, like, about it, but nobody wanted to say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, Bubba Ray got, like, pissed off about it. And he was like, you freaking kidding me? No, I'm going to say something. And they're like, no, don't do it. He was like, no, that's bullshit. We just went through tables. We threw ourselves off ladders. We almost killed ourselves for these people for a half hour. Are you out of your damn mind? No. So he went and he was like, and, like, I don't know if he went with somebody else and they were trying to, like, say it in a nice way and he just flat out went and said it. But he just, like, went to JR and he was like, JR, this is effing BS. Like, I'm not going to do, like, what the hell happened? Do you not think that we did a good job? And he was like, all right, let me get the checkbook out. I'll write you a new check. I hope they got every cent that they deserved. I hope that they did, and I hope that they didn't spend it all in one place. Unless it was, on a new house, then I guess you don't really have a choice.
Yeah. So, anyway, WrestleMania. The phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, change. Obviously, it changed the wrestling industry. I probably wouldn't have wrestling as we know it today without WrestleMania. So it's definitely I would say, if not the biggest, definitely one of the biggest events in wrestling that fundamentally changed the industry.
Yeah.
You could argue that, Vince taking over the territories and, kind of, pushing the company that into more of a monopoly and stuff, really started it. But I think WrestleMania kind of was WrestleMania started sports entertainment. It was, before that, wrestling was not as mainstream. That WrestleMania kind of really propelled it into a new strata. And, we probably would be we might even be still in the territory system if WrestleMania had failed. So
yeah, we very well could be.
Yeah.
But I do not know. Oh my gosh, this is now our longest episode. We couldn't even keep a longest episode for more than 3 episodes.
Yeah, we broke the streak already.
It's a new lap record. Oh. Do you remember that from
Yeah. Star Wars.
Yes, yeah. Pod Racers.
Yeah.
Oh God. Yeah, WrestleMania, the showcase of the immortals, the show of shows, probably the best wrestling program all year that people look forward to. Well, I would say the best one all year is now Wrestle Kingdom in Japan, but as far as but it's the spectacle itself. You can't compare it to anything, really, except for the Super Bowl. That's the only thing you can compare it to.
I honestly, WrestleMania is probably almost equivalent to the Super Bowl in terms of, its cultural impact and, how many people watch it. Because, people that don't even normally watch wrestling, on a regular basis, that don't maybe watch Raw or SmackDown here or there, will watch WrestleMania, There's people that don't even watch the show regularly that will tune in just to WrestleMania just to see. It's pretty much the most mainstream wrestling event there is. In terms of the viewership of it. it's just it's there. It's a cultural phenomenon. And it started out as a Hail Mary, and it has become ingrained in our society.
What a touchdown.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And since I can't say it better myself, I would like to say thank you to everybody who stuck with us for these 2.5 hours. Good God. Where we just talked about wrestling and WrestleMania and the business and all these crazy things. When we didn't even get into the Undertaker's streak, we have to end it with the Undertaker's streak. I feel like everybody's been waiting for this, so we need to get it there before anything happens. The Undertaker had the most unprecedented accolade in all of wrestling. The streak.
Yes.
He beat 21 guys at 21 consecutive WrestleManias, and without losing. And then at WrestleMania 30, Brock Lesnar defeats The Undertaker in the most shocking moment in all of pro wrestling, which Vince McMahon kind of decided at the last minute on whether or not to do it, and very few people even knew. A lot of people thought this was a mistake. Mm-hmm. They even had the graphic of 22-0 ready to go.
Yeah.
And they had to change it on the fly to 22-1.
21-1.
21-1, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And now they've since added to it where it's his other wins, they add to it, and then it looks like it's 23 or 24 and 2 or whatever it is, because they had Roman Reigns beat him later on, which whatever, it already happened.
Yeah.
At that point, you just let everybody win. after he's been beaten, it's it's not even a streak anymore. So
Right.
And you can't add to the streak. You can't fudge the numbers now.
Yeah.
So
Should
I'm sorry. Continue.
Well, I was gonna say, I remember when it first happened, there was so much speculation that Brock had basically gone off the reservation and it wasn't supposed to end that way. People were saying that, Brock, rigged it. He pinned The Undertaker. First of all, he injured The Undertaker on purpose, people were saying, and then pinned The Undertaker when he wasn't supposed to, and won the match, which obviously that came out as false.
Yeah, well, of course. Brock's not that kind of guy.
No. And
he doesn't like people, but he respects the work ethic of people who work hard. So he's not gonna it'd be one thing if The Undertaker was just some snot-nosed punk who felt everything was owed to him. Mm-hmm. But he's not that guy at all. So of course Brock would treat him with as much respect. And that match, The Undertaker's not really sure when it happened, but something happened within the first couple of minutes where he fell funny.
Yeah, he was severely concussed.
Yeah.
I've heard in interviews later on that Taker pretty much doesn't remember anything that happened during the match.
Yeah, he said it on the documentaries that he doesn't remember anything after the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, he knows now because he's watched the match, so he knows what happened during it, but he cannot recall personally. I think he said from he remembers walking out to the ring, and the next thing he remembers is waking up in the hospital the next day.
Yeah,
pretty much. Lesnar, I don't know if he was the right choice to end the streak.
I don't think anybody was the right choice. That's my question I was building to, is should it have happened?
Yeah, I think it should have happened. I agree it should have happened. There's a couple ways they could have done it. I think losing to Bray Wyatt would have been a really good passing the torch to Bray, because Bray kind of has that supernatural, gimmick a little bit.
Yeah, they're trying. Well, that's what they're trying to do. They've been trying to make him the new Undertaker, but they've just stopped and started his pushes, and they've made them hokey when they start to get good. So they've kind of bungled him along the way, where he'll never be that.
No,
You could say the same thing about Kane in a lot of things. Would Kane be better than the Undertaker, or just as good as the Undertaker not in terms of like a presence and a character and believability, but I mean in terms of like, you know, if they gave him if they gave him like a proper win streak, if they gave him like a proper title run, if they did if they didn't stop and start him in certain parts, like they kind of bungled his pushes every time he got a push. But if they didn't do that with Kane, would he be at the same level? Not that he's not at the same. It's hard to put out what I'm trying to say, because I don't want to. I don't want to like sound like I'm saying anything bad about him, because I respect the hell out of that guy. He's one of my favorite wrestlers too. Yeah. If they hadn't bungled his pushes so often, would he be held in? Would he be held in as high of a? Would he be talked about the same as the Undertaker in terms of a legendary career?
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah,
I think Kane would have been one of the better options for ending Taker's streak.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I had a friend. Well, you know him too. Our buddy the Fridge. He for years he was saying that Kane should have been the guy to beat the streak, and there were years he was like, I hope that it's Kane. If they shouldn't, but if they ever do, I hope it's Kane. And then it was Brock, and I remember that night, like I was in like such a daze that I like walked around the block talking to my ex-girlfriend for like hours. She was my girlfriend at the time, my then girlfriend. Mm-hmm. For like a half hour to 45 minutes, just complaining about how this was a mistake and how they shouldn't have done it and how it ruined the rest of WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. It didn't, but at the time it really did. Like looking back at it, it didn't, because like Daniel Bryan still got the big win that he deserved. But it was just it was a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah. Well, people were pissed.
Oh, yeah.
People were pissed.
Well, Joe Marone's dad came in and he was pissed off too. Because, well, he wasn't pissed off, but he was like, because he liked Brock, and he likes Brock, and he was like, honestly, I couldn't see anybody else doing this, but like, why would they do that? Right. Like, he was just confused.
Yeah. It really didn't make that much sense at the time. I guess, especially because they...
I mean, it still doesn't.
They didn't really do much with Brock after.
Well, he just became the champion, and then he went... But then he started becoming the part-time champion, where he held the belt, was the final boss fight for whoever wins the Royal Rumble, and that was it. Right.
And so it was kind of... I don't know. I could see why... I think people were rightfully pissed off. It was definitely a polarizing moment.
At best, it was polarizing.
Yeah. I think there was better choices to do it. I also think that The Undertaker should have been his last WrestleMania, is the one that he, like, where we lost the streak.
Yeah, that's what I think too, is if it was good, if they were going to end the streak, it should have been his retirement match.
Yeah.
Like what we thought was going to happen with Roman Reigns, because he left everything in the ring and he wasn't sure if that was his last match. And then when he won, and then I don't know, according to the documentary, when he watched the match, he was so like heartbroken by his performance that he was like, I can't let that be the last one.
Yeah.
So he started chasing the dragon of, the last one has to be a great one.
Yeah, which I think the AJ Styles match was a fair ending to
I have to
WrestleMania.
I have to agree, it was fair. I think if they did a real match in the ring, it would have been spectacular too.
Yeah.
But, and I think I would have liked to see that more, but at the same time, I don't know how that, I can only imagine what it would have been. I can't, for all I know, it would have been a train wreck. Not that I think it would have been, but I don't know, because they did it the cinematic way, and the cinematic way protected him, and it protected the aura, and it embodied the character, and it summed up what the character was and is in the best way possible. So, and they even opened the door for him possibly doing another match in that style, and I think fans are also happy with that because he's not going to get hurt doing this, or he's not going to get seriously injured doing this. Because I remember for years I just kept saying, like when he was there, it wasn't, oh, I can't wait to see The Undertaker. It just, like, the conversation ended up becoming, God, I hope he's okay. God, I hope he doesn't seriously injure himself. God, I hope he doesn't wind up in a wheelchair after this. You know, I want this guy to have a long and happy life and I want him to go out with dignity. And I'm glad that he can do that now.
Yeah. Yeah. That was always my biggest fear, too, is that's like, you know, you see this guy, he gets slower and slower every year because he's getting older. And it's, you know, he's still on borrowed time. He was on borrowed time for probably the last 15 years.
Yeah, and he was still going to the best of his ability at that time, like, that he could at that time. And I appreciated seeing him, but at the same time, I really just was hoping that I didn't see. I was just hoping that I didn't see the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I agree. You know, or even turning out like, you know, like someone like Mick Foley who's like essentially crippled. You know, could barely walk. You know. Yeah. You don't even want to see that. At least he's kind of still. You know, I'm sure he's got aches and pains, and you know but at least he could still, you know, walk around and do things, and he's not like crippled, you know, and that's really, you know, it's a good thing to see. So I really hope he does take his retirement and enjoys it, you know, and you know, if they bring him back for appearances here and there, then yeah, that's fine, but don't, like, you know, let him enjoy his retirement now. Don't make him wrestle twice a year.
Yeah, please don't. Let the guy have his retirement with dignity. If you want to use him, maybe have him make an appearance every once in a while. Mm-hmm. But but don't put him in a full match.
Yeah, and honestly, you know, Taker's my favorite wrestler, and I love the character of The Undertaker. But it's nice to, like, that he gets to be Mark Calloway now. Yeah. You know? In interviews, you know, he went on Joe Rogan, and, you know, he did the Broken Skull podcast, you know, with Stone Cold, and he gets to just be himself. He gets to be Mark Calloway and just talk about his career off the cuff. Doesn't have to stay in character, because, you know, Taker was the most serious about kayfabe probably of any wrestler.
Oh yeah, he only did interviews when he was doing the American Badass gimmick because he could be himself for once, because that was the character that was the part of the character that he was in there where
closest to.
Yeah. And then but like anytime he was the dead man or like the regular Undertaker gimmick, he didn't speak to anybody. Nobody knew anything about his private life or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, which is the way it should be, I think. It should be, they should be their private lives should be as private as possible because, God, don't you just not want to have cameras following you around all the time? And don't you not want to have people don't you not want to have people like checking your like social media pages, like nosing about and like business they don't need?
Yeah.
Like, just have why wouldn't you want a normal private life?
Right.
You know, and then a few days, and then you're on the road for like however long. You know, you got TV cameras everywhere. You know, just get away from that all.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm happy for him. I think they are going. I've seen things that they are planning to use him in NXT as a trainer also, like so that he could like help work with the big guys.
Yeah. It'd be nice to see him help some of the guys kind of develop because you don't really see, you know, like you said, we were talking about Bray a little bit, like he's trying to kind of take over like the creepy guy gimmick, but like it's not as successful. So it'd be nice to see him maybe work with some guys.
Well, the lack of success, I don't think is Bray Wyatt's fault. I think it's the booking. I think the booking has killed him.
Yeah. So it would be nice to maybe if Undertaker can kind of like influence that a little bit, maybe get some more of like, you know, like the
character development.
And like
he would be great for that.
Interesting gimmicks. Yeah, exactly. So it would be good. I hope he he can do that and kind of push it into that direction a little bit because that's what people want to see. I'm frankly like sick of the reality era. Like I want to see characters. I don't want to see like
Well, I don't want to see stupid characters, but I would like to see characters again.
Well, right. Yeah, I don't want to see gimmicks like the gobbledygooker, but it would be nice to see some guys that are playing a character instead of just being themselves, and they're always like, on social media, they're the same thing. It's like, let's have some interesting characters,
Yeah.
So.
But I still don't think that they should have ended the streak ever.
No.
No.
I agree. Or if like I said, if they were going to, it should have been.
It should have been somebody who made sense.
It should have been someone who made sense.
And it should have been his retirement.
Kane, somebody like that. And it should have been the last match, retired, done. Undertaker is like, and honestly, it should have probably been like a buried alive match. I think that would have been appropriate.
Oh, no, not a buried alive match.
Why not? It's the Undertaker's match. It's like
it makes sense, but I want it. I would want a good old fashioned clean match.
I don't know. I think finally putting the Undertaker into the grave and it would be a good send off.
If they buried him after.
Maybe,
but just not in the weird Royal Rumble casket match thing where they made him ascend to heaven, or and we don't want the Survivor Series entrance where he has the bat wings.
And on the third day,
yeah. But Undertaker streak, WrestleMania embodied. I think the best last match that he had, other than the AJ Styles one, I think the best one that he had in recent memory was the one with Punk. I think that was the last classic match that he put on, and also Punk knew how to work with him. He made it feel good, and I mean Although the Paul Bearer thing, I think, was kind of that they shouldn't. I don't know if they really should have done it, but they got the blessings of Paul Bearer's sons and everything to do it, and it still integrated him into the match. And I'm sure they were planning on bringing him in before he passed. And I think that was the last great match that the last truly great match that the Undertaker had at WrestleMania. I think, or in his whole career, I think, was with CM Punk at Mania. That one I have to rewatch. But you can't really say anything. You can't really have a WrestleMania conversation without bringing up the streak. So now, I think now, and oh gosh, I could stall for 7 minutes, but I don't know what else to talk about, and I'm too tired. It's almost 2 o'clock in the morning.
It's been almost a 3-hour podcast. This is by far our longest.
Yeah, I may break this up into parts. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe give the people a break. Yeah, maybe give the people a break a little bit.
Yeah.
So you know what? Maybe I will do that. Maybe I'll do WrestleMania. Maybe I'll switch things around, and our M. Dickey Games podcast will be moved to a later date. We have the recording still, but I think I will divide the WrestleMania podcast into 2, and release them within a week of each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Now all of you people in digital media device land know our plans. Good for you. Good for you.
Damn you, Kukin Brothers.
This is the Queekin Brothers' fault. Of course. Our arch nemesis, the Queekin Brothers, and their damned lumber business. Or at least that's the front that they're using.
Yeah.
They probably designed the bunkers for the elites, and where everybody goes in after they blow up the world. Probably. It's got to be the Queekin Brothers. Who else?
Yeah.
I bet you their slogan is "Evil and Lumber." It's just Kai and Tai. They're doing the evil indeed thing, and it turns out. And they were completely kayfabe and everybody, and they truly were evil indeed the entire time. All right. This is our show about WrestleMania. I've been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
And remember, everybody, question everything. Thank you so much for joining us on this spectacular endeavor. Check us out on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go on patreon.com/whydoesthisexist. Give us your money. Check us out on Podbean, Stitcher. God, how many things are we on? Pandora, TuneIn, Alexa, iHeartRadio, Player FM, Listen Notes,
iTunes,
Apple Podcasts /iTunes, Amazon, Alexa, Amazon Music, Audible,
iHeartRadio,
Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Podbean. I probably mentioned all of those things 4 to 5 different times. YouTube again. If you want to email us a tip, either, and you don't feel like commenting on our YouTube channel about stuff to talk about, whydoesthisexistshow@gmail.com is where you want to go. And we appreciate all of you. Thank you. Again, question everything. Good night, good morning, whatever time zone you're in.
Gute Nacht.
Or guten Morgen.
See ya.